Hey everyone, so let's talk about the different phases of EMDR. Oftentimes these phases kind of depend on really what we're talking about, what kind of trauma we're doing, or really just the person as well. It also depends on how long ago the trauma was. If the trauma happened when, say, you were 6 and now you're 40, then I kind of have to get a trauma history between 6 to 40 for all of those memories that might be validating the trauma or things that trigger the trauma or anything like that. So phase number 1 is treatment planning. This is when I get a good idea of what's bringing you in, what we're going to be targeting with EMDR, and some of the things that might be triggering you or symptoms that you're currently experiencing. So once I get a good idea of what's going on, then we move on to stage 2 of the 8 phases of EMDR. And this is preparation. So this is when we start discussing the treatment plan, what the memory is that we're going to focus, and learning some regulation skills like a container, or a safe calm place. And I just kind of check in, make sure that we're ready to start EMDR and that that's something that we are at a good point to handle. So when we talk about EMDR, honestly, stages 1, 2, and 3 are probably the fastest stages, but they are also the most important because they set the groundwork for what we're going to be working on and addressing. So for me, I like to kind of get to know the full picture. So getting through these stages might take anything from 1 session to 3, but my average is kind of taking about 2 sessions. Usually I have 1 session of about stage 1 and 2, and then I have another session of about finishing up 2 and going into 3. But everybody does this a little bit differently. I've known clinicians that were able to do all 3 stages in 1 session. But I just like to make sure that I get a really good picture. And that's not saying that other clinicians don't. That is just my preference, and that's how I have learned how to do it. So when we get done with phases 1, 2, and 3, we move into stage 4. And this is probably the phase that I think takes the longest, because this is when we're really going through the chunk of what's happening. So this is when we work on desensitization. So this is changing how the brain associates trauma with its triggers by using the EMDR technique. And this is when we're doing the BLS and doing the reprocessing, and we're doing the light bar or tactile paddles or headphones or whatever that we've figured out works best for you. This can last multiple sessions. Usually it kind of really depends on the person, and I don't really have an average. I've had it get done as fast as 3, and I've had it last a very long time. But it also depends on how long sessions are, how often we're meeting, and a lot of other factors that go into really how quick EMDR is completed. So when we finish desensitization, pretty much you should be telling me that your SUD's at a 0 or at a 1 and probably not going to go lower, and that there's really nothing else coming up when we check on that memory. You just kind of get a blank, or it feels numb, or it just feels distant or far away. So then at this point, this is when we move into stage 5, which is installation. So here we're going to install that positive belief into the thought process so it replaces the negative one. So this is usually our positive cognition. So if our negative cognition was we are a bad person, the positive cognition that we're going to try and install is that I am a good person. So this is usually where I ask you to hold that memory that we've been working on and the thought, I am a good person together. And then we start doing those eye movements with it. So that hopefully when I ask you on a 1 to 7 scale, you believe that you are a good person and that number is maybe a 6 or 7. So as soon as we're done with stage 5, we move on to stage 6, which is the body scan. And I think the body scan is usually a really interesting conversation that I have with clients, because I've had people ask what checking our body really has to do with working on a traumatic experience. And the best way or example that I've really came up with to explain it is, say you were in a car accident. Usually when you think about the car accident, you think about what happened, you think about the couple moments before you got hit, when you got hit, and then you think about the aftermath. So what the car looked like, and maybe any injuries that you had. Oh my gosh, I really messed up my hip. So it's really important for us to really go back and check in with the body and to see if that body still has any memories with that traumatic experience. Because your body still might be remembering, oh my gosh, my hip really hurt. So with the body scan, it's really important that we make sure that there's really no more feelings left in the body. Another really interesting thing that I've ran into a lot is that I feel like there's almost like a spot. So, for example, maybe when you get really stressed, you always get headaches. So I might consider that your spot. And that just might be where a lot of the trauma or symptoms or triggers kind of manifest and like to show themselves. So your body likes to get your attention and slow it down, especially when we have gotten into the habit of not listening to our body or not paying attention to it. So if your body knows that it can give you a migraine and you're going to go lay down, it's going to do that when it needs you to take a break. So it's really important for us to kind of acknowledge that and really scan the body to make sure that there's nothing left over with a trauma. So the last two stages of EMDR are closure and reevaluation. So closure is kind of when we just check in to make sure like you're okay, how are you feeling, what did you think about the EMDR experience, and maybe what's something that you learned. So usually during the last stage of EMDR, this is when I check in to make sure where the client is at. This is when we discuss like if they want to do another memory or not. And oftentimes it's completely okay because EMDR can be really exhausting. So if the client's like, no, I just kind of want to go back to regular therapy and just talk and just kind of go over things, or the client might decide that they want to break from therapy altogether. At that point, I just advise them that they're always welcome back. I'm here if they need anything or if anything's kind of coming up, just to reach out.